Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Yes, 2024 was indeed a terrible, bad, devastatingly awful year for Russia. And I know people might say, Georgie, you're just spouting nonsense. Obviously, Russia is having a good time. They are winning. They are advancing on the front line. There's a lot of problems that Ukraine is being challenged with. We always hear a lot of media talking about all of the things being kind of bad for Ukraine. What on earth are you talking about? Well, let's look at this. Let's look at the situation and what happened in 2024 and what was exactly Russia after. So let's kind of put some of the broad strokes on this. What is Russian goal in Ukraine? Because it is definitely not the territory. Whenever someone discusses with you and says the territory for Russia that it controls right now is what Russian goal is, and they will be just happy to stop where they are and finish this war, you're absolutely wrong, and you're believing someone's red herring, most likely Russian propaganda. Because what they're actually after, they want to see Ukraine be a subject of Russia. They want Ukraine subjugated. And this is their ultimate goals. And this year has been dominated by charts like this, where we see Ukrainians inflicting immense damage to Russians. But if we're not talking about the damage itself, and we're talking a lot about this, what is then the broader scope? How are these damage numbers? How does this pain that Russia is sustaining compares to the goals that Russia put up for themselves of subjugating Ukraine? We can broadly divide three areas in which Russia needs really major advances if they're looking to quote-unquote win this war. The first part is a potential military victory of destroying the Ukrainian armed forces and taking over Ukrainian land. The second option is to convincing Ukrainian allies to not supply them with weapons and undermine the powers that are supporting Ukraine in their fight against Russia, because Ukraine is obviously a smaller and less powerful country, so it cannot fight Russia on its own. And finally, the third option is potentially subverting the political and civil systems in Ukraine to undermine the Ukrainian society so they will essentially give up to Russians. Well, let's look at all of these and let's decide whether or not Russia is achieving their goals. And we start by looking at the numbers of the combat engagements. This year has been dominated by Russian advances. This year has been dominated by Russia getting more and more powerful. They were getting majority of their equipment delivered from their stockpiles. They've been emptying the stockpiles from the Soviet times. They've been building a lot of the factories themselves. They've been setting up a lot of deliveries from their allies of weapons. This year, in a large sense, argued by a lot of the experts, have been the year of the Russian dominance. It's been the year in which Russia has built up its military power, where they fully transitioned to the military economy, and they are now kind of the most powerful that they will ever be, because we all know that they're running low on stocks. We all know that their economy is also struggling a little bit. So this is potentially, we are now seeing Russia at its most powerful. So here is the chart of Russia-controlled territory in Ukraine to kind of visually represent for you. It goes from February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, all the way up to November 2024. And the purple and red is the territory of Ukraine that is occupied by Russia. And as you can see, 2024 doesn't really look that impressive. When you look at this chart of Russian building up their might and getting more and more and more powerful, and then you compare, well, what was actually achieved, then you don't see the same kind of a scale of growth in this chart, have you? Especially because during this year, we potentially saw Ukraine one of the weakest. There was significant delays for equipment deliveries. There were significant issues for Ukraine starting this year when it came out of the failed 2023 offensive, with problematic political situation, with depleted supplies, and there's a lot of things to say why that offensive was a failure, and it's a whole discussion for another time. But let's just kind of start off with that. And then there was this half a year of non-weapons delivery from US at all. So there was a lot of issues for Ukraine, and also not to miss the Europeans that promised a lot of deliveries to Ukraine, but some of them are being delivered only now where they were supposed to be delivered like half a year ago. So there was significant delays from the Europeans as well. So arguably, we saw Ukraine being pretty weak because the deliveries from the initial stockpiles have been running out dry, and all of the new deliveries to Ukraine are essentially coming from the newly set up production chains in the European Union and United States. And this is extremely important where we look at the map. And here is exactly where we start seeing issues, and where I'm going to start pushing back to that myth of Russian great dominance. Because biggest Russian achievements was in the area of Donetsk. They were pretty successful in capturing the areas around Avdiivka and Ocheretine and move all the way up to Pokrovsk, quite a big city in this region. But how does this really compare? We already saw this chart that doesn't really show that there has been massive change in territory controlled, because while it is reported what Russia is capturing, it kind of is always forgotten the things that Russia is not capturing, because in my perspective, there is a lot more of that. Let's talk about something like Chasiv Yar. Chasiv Yar, remember that one? You might remember it before everything ever started around Avdiivka. Chasiv Yar, there was a lot of speculation early in the year that it was supposed to be captured before the 9th of May. Remember that? Before the Russian victory date. Now, Russia has entered some parts of Chasiv Yar, but they're pretty far away from getting it all. The same with Toretsk. Toretsk, when Russia entered the city, people were like, well, Toretsk is lost. Now this whole area is going to be just collapsing. Russia was advancing through all sides. Well, that's it. Like, that's Ukraine is just collapsing in the east. Yet, this is the end of the year, and the Toretsk fight is not even close to being over. It is still being fought. Moreover, any kind of semi-encirclement of Toretsk has been prevented. The truth is, when people have calculated and put the numbers together, and I'm going to put you the numbers as well, so you kind of give a little bit of a perspective on this. When we're talking about what Russia has actually captured this year, the territory that they did were relatively small. It is this Avdiivka, and there is some territory here in the south, and there was also some territory in the north. So let's judge it by what Russia really wants and what Russia has achieved. So let's talk about the numbers. If Russia wants to achieve its military goal and subjugate Ukraine in a way of capturing the territory, then I believe that everyone would kind of understand it and perceive if Russia would capture all of the territory east of the Dnipro River and the city of Kyiv itself. That would be understandable. Yes, there would be a Western Ukraine existing, but there would be a condition for Russia to declare major victory, and I believe even Putin would be even okay to stop at that moment. So when we start calculating, okay, so what did Russia really achieve this year? Because this year, Russia has captured, with all of their might and success, 2,600 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. That is about 1,000 square miles in a year, with a year when they had like the most growth, when they pulled everything that they could from their reserves. And we're going to look at that a little bit later. But more importantly, 2,600 kilometers in a year. Is it a lot? Is it not a lot? Well, let's compare. So the Ukrainian controlled territory to the east of the Dnipro River, by the start of the year of 2024, it was approximately, there is no precise estimates because obviously there is not a guy that measured it all, but it's approximately 240,000 square kilometers, or about 93,000 square miles, roughly speaking. And that territory, if Russia will continue advancing at 2,600 kilometers per year, every year, it will take Russia only 92 years to reach Kyiv, to take that territory. It's not even taking into account capturing Kyiv. We're talking about just getting the territory to the east of the Dnipro River. Now, obviously, the argument can go, it's like, Georgie, obviously, the war is not linear. Potentially, Russia can advance faster, potentially sometimes slower, and so on. And it's like, yes, but what you need to look at is like, is the just the scale of this number. 92 years. That is the number at the current Russian ratio of advance. With all of their might, with all of the newspapers claiming and stating that Russia is winning bigly. Okay, well, Georgie, obviously no. Like, Russia doesn't really want to capture military Kyiv. They just want to capture the areas of that they claimed to be part of their constitution, because I believe Putin, like someone might say, like Putin actually said that he doesn't really want Kyiv anymore. So all he wants was the area of Luhansk, area of Donetsk, area of Zaporizhia, and area of Kherson. Like these 4 regions that Russia, within their borders, that Russia has declared to be part of their country. Okay, well, let's calculate that one. The total land area that Ukraine controls in these 4 regions is 33,500 square kilometers, or 13,000 square miles approximately. So again, if we look at the advance ratio of Russia of 2,600 kilometers per year, it would take Russia 13 years to capture these regions. And that includes a couple of points that I must make. Firstly, Russia has indeed advanced successfully in the Donetsk region this year, and they captured a lot of villages, but they didn't really capture any major cities. I mean, yes, they captured Avdiivka, which is a pre-war relatively big settlement, but Avdiivka has been on the front lines since day one of the full-scale Russian invasion. It's been bombarded non-stop. It's been erased completely, like it's just completely moon surface over there. Yes, they were able to capture then smaller villages and smaller settlements, but they're yet to capture a city that is even close. Every time we start talking in a city, we start talking about city like Chasiv Yar, which is like a medium-sized city as well. Russia hasn't captured it. Remember, 9th of May? Not even close. Toretsk, also relatively small, but cities nonetheless. Still, Russia's still fighting. Pokrovsk, Russia hasn't even started getting there. It's a massive agglomeration, and Russia is not yet been very successful in fighting in the city. They were able to capture Bakhmut, but Bakhmut was captured by Russia by essentially erasing Wagner. Remember those guys? Wagner forces completely gone. They were supposedly, arguably, the best Russian forces had to offer. A lot of them were stating that. Completely destroyed. I know that later they tried to do this weird coup with Prigozhin and so on, but the main force was obliterated in Bakhmut. When people are talking, it's like, okay, it's just these 4 regions. Yes, but it's still 13 years. And even if you say it's like, yes, but Russia is just going to get better and better and better and better, we are still not even close to getting there. It is still years and years and years. And then finally, this year, it was not only Russia that was capturing territory. Ukraine was also hitting back. Ukraine actually took part of Russia. They've entered the Russian territory and took it for themselves. And now Russia is really forced, if they want to have some kind of a dominant position in which they can state, like now the goals are achieved, we control the territory, they need to kick Ukrainians out of Russia. So if we actually add the Kursk, or more like subtract the area that Ukrainians have captured in Kursk, and we're going to talk, like, let's not talk about the territory that Ukraine captured initially, over the 1,000 square kilometers. Let's say at the territory that are controlling now by the end of December, which is about 800 square kilometers. So Russia over this year captured 2,600 square kilometers, and Ukrainians captured in Kursk 800 square kilometers. So net territory gain for Russia is just 1,800 square kilometers. And for my American friends, that is approximately 700 square miles. Or if we put it in a perspective, that is about just a bit more than the city of Houston. So without arguing for the density, we're talking here only about the area, because Russia didn't fight for such a dense urban area. But in area sense, that is what Russia has achieved in a year where Ukraine struggled, where Ukraine barely got resources, where all of the promises on delivering things on time, all of the promises on quantity have been broken, where US hasn't delivered for so long, and yet Russia was pulling all of the hundreds of thousands of units and technical equipment and everything from the stockpiles of the Soviet Union. This is what Russia achieved. This is not even close. I know Houston is a big city, but in the scale of the territory, it is not that much, not nearly enough. Moreover, when we're talking about the cost, we always seen this year how it transformed the Russian military, how the Russian military went from almost repeating the 2024 fighting style in columns that we saw at the start of the year, where we saw these countless vehicles in columns driving over the minefields, being blown to smithereens by Ukrainian mines and drones. Now Russians are driving these Mad Max style trucks that are I don't even know what to say, but this is the state of the Russian military. It is for now just relatively individual cases that we're seeing here, but this is where it's getting to. Russia is bleeding equipment, Russia is bleeding resources. And when we're talking about bleeding resources, I like to talk numbers, because a lot of people say, like, Georgie, but I saw a video of you North Koreans sending like a whole train of artillery systems to Russia. I say yes, but it's only because we are not comparing it to how much Russia has been sending to itself from these stockpiles. Because when we look at the numbers, and I highlighted you the numbers that are critical, when we highlight the numbers that Russia have been seen decreasing over the years, then suddenly you're like, man, that one train is solving nothing, because Russia has been very lucky that they had this past superpower that was arming itself to fight the rest of the world for 50 years in the face of the Soviet Union's having these massive stockpiles. But the stockpiles are not endless. And right now, we're seeing as Russian military transforms from the military Soviet stockpile army to Mad Max Fury Road army. Then let's discuss the second argument. The allies in the West are ready to give up on Ukraine. European Union, US are all becoming weaker. They are not able to resist Russia. Well, my question is, where is that even coming from? Was it because of the NATO non-expansion? Because Russia, remember at the start of the war, they demanded that the NATO actually fall back to the pre-1992 borders to essentially exclude all of the new members past 1992 and remove all of the equipment from the Eastern and Central Europe? No, instead we saw Sweden finally join NATO this year, with Finland joining a little bit earlier. Sweden became a NATO member just this year in March, if you've forgotten. Or maybe it's the European Union, paralyzed by the powers that are supporting Russia, like Slovakia and Hungary. No, it didn't. Moreover, European Union worked quite hard. The new European Commission is heavily managed by a lot of the representatives from the more, if I can say so, hawkish powers against Russia. People that are coming in with claims that, no, we're going to do more to support Ukraine. The Council and the European Union as an organization, instead of being paralyzed this year, they were actually working quite hard to see how they can work around these blockers of the nations in Hungary and Slovakia, and instead also trigger the over-government mechanism of Europe itself from the European Union to provide money. So no, European Union has been doing a lot, and the promises are from the new Commission that they will do even more coming forward. Or we're talking about the Russian assets. Have you heard about that 300 billion frozen Russian assets? For a longer time, we looked at how Ukraine can use those, how they can get access. And for a lot of years, we've been hearing that there is no possibility to work with them, that we cannot even try to touch them. Well, this year, finally, we saw the new pathways on how there can be work done with those assets to provide Ukraine with the benefits from them. Now, it's not handing over 300 billion of those assets right away, but it's a lot of good steps, and we're talking numbers that are quite good. We're talking about like in total maybe something like 40 to 50 billion that are going to be provided to Ukraine, maybe even more as we go along. So no, there is more support from the G7 and from the Russian assets themselves. So we see the allies working to make Russia pay for its crimes. So Russia will be financing support for Ukraine. Or is it the Russian political campaigns in the Eastern Europe that they're trying to subvert, with the Moldova being on the chopping block as an example here? Moldova, the country that was for a longer time controlled by a lot of pro-Russian narratives, where we saw a big Russian propaganda campaign being waged in their elections to prevent Moldova to align themselves with the European Union. It all failed. Moldova elected pro-European government. They enshrined in a constitution that they will be joining EU. And now, because of Russia threatening to blackmail Moldova with their gas deliveries and so on, Moldova says like, well, you're not going to do us any good with that. We are actually going to nationalize whatever you're giving us, and instead we're going to take a more hawkish stance. And potentially we might see the resolution of the Transnistria conflict, because in Transnistria they're actually going to be having a bit of a trouble without a Russian gas supply and the supply from Russian at all. It might create a possibility windows for Moldova to actually reunify once again, but it's a whole talk for another time. Or maybe it's the USA, where we see that there is a change of administration, and then suddenly we think about that US will stop supporting Ukraine. Well, firstly, let's talk about Joe Biden. No, Joe Biden decided, well, if I'm exiting out anyway, then I'm going to deliver Ukraine everything that I can. So actually, in the last couple of months of his presidency, Joe Biden has decided the delivery of everything to Ukraine. There's been so much deliveries promised already to Ukraine have been signed off. And especially with the long-term contracts for Ukraine, it's incredible. And just recently, just now, he announced that additional 2.5 billion are coming for Ukraine. Ukrainians have been stating that this help that Joe Biden just did in the last couple of months can help them get through 2025 at least. So that's another year that is basically covered by United States at all. And this is with the expectations that people have that Trump's administration is just going to come in and sell off Ukraine to Russia. But unfortunately, the situation is not as clear-cut, because Russia has actually rejected some of the proposals for talks by the United States already, even before the official peace plan proposals, so to say. And when I'm saying peace plan, I'm cringing inside, I know. But Russia has shown little to no willingness to actually negotiate. Now, will they try to negotiate and extend the time to prevent weapon supplies to Ukraine? Yeah, for sure. But it doesn't seem that they are going to be negotiating in any kind of good faith, because their rejections and their answers basically saying that Ukraine just should capitulate, they should remove any kind of military, and we should just control Ukraine outright. That is the Russian proposal. And while indeed I initially believed that Russia is positioning themselves to have stronger negotiating positions in these talks with Donald Trump, it feels to me that because Russia took over some territory in Ukraine and they're continuing advancing, then suddenly, maybe, just maybe, Putin is actually just smelling his own farts, and he thinks that he's winning bigly. That he thinks that actually he can get even more, that potentially if this war will continue on, then we'll see Ukraine capitulating completely, and then the allies give up on Ukraine at all. But so far it seems that what Trump is actually pushing for is that potentially cutting off some of that USA dedication and maybe providing only critical systems, and instead it's the Europeans that should be picking up a little bit more of the slack and pick up more support for Ukraine, which they actually do. There's been a lot of investment from Europeans into Ukraine, and hopefully we will see more investment as potentially Trump will push the Europeans to invest more into their defense spending. Or maybe we're talking about the Western powers just allowing Russia to run its economy while also threatening with the hybrid warfare and not seeing any response from the allies. Well, unfortunately for Russia, there are players and countries that are not taking any shit from them. And instead, we see Finland standing up. And Finland is a basically gateway for the Russian oil tankers. And while Denmark is still flip-flopping, because we see something cases like this is another example of the Russian oil tanker. So what happened is, while it was moving in Denmark, this oil tanker was declaring that it was actually going towards the port of Tallinn in Estonia, which is located right over here. But as soon as it passed Danish waters, it's like, haha, JK, actually we're going to Russia. So it changed its destination. So it's not hard to detect these Russian oil tankers that are shadow fleeting. It's all about the willingness to do something about it. And my hope is that because of countries like the Baltics, because of the countries like Finland, there's going to be a strong stance against Russian economic position, against the Russian shadow fleets. Therefore, the second point of weakening Ukrainians' positions with the allies, I don't really understand what you're talking about. It feels instead that a lot of the allies are instead waking up to what Russia is doing and are actually finding ways on how they can do more for Ukraine with what they have. And then the third part, the Ukrainian society. We've heard a lot that there is a lot of issues in Ukrainian society, that supposedly people are deserting, that supposedly no one trusts Zelensky, but it's all bullshit, because data does not show it. Now, Ukrainian society is definitely struggling. People are feeling pretty bad. They are feeling pretty depressed. But majority of people, absolutely dominant majority, I'm talking about over 65%, are still believing Zelensky as the leader and are still believing in how the country is run. With all of the issues that wartime leaders are to experience, it is very common for wartime leaders to be seen in a very negative light, because there's always issues that a country is doing during war times. It's always painful, specifically during war times, because it costs human lives, and that is the price that is very, very painful. But we still see major support for Zelensky. We still see that despite everything, Zelensky is still an efficient leader, not just externally, but internally. So I've heard this analysis someone give for how Ukrainians see their military and command perform. Ukrainian society is a very lively and active democracy. And a lot of Ukrainians, it's almost like their expectation that Zelensky himself and General of the Army Syrskyi will come themselves to their home and answer all of their question and reflect on everything that they're doing, strictly what they're stating, and they will answer for everything individually. It's a bit of like a delusion, but that is like how Ukrainian society is. A lot of people in Ukraine literally are critiquing the power and expecting the power to do more, and they're being vocal for it, and it's being often misinterpreted as untrust, whereas in reality, that is just a part of the Ukrainian type of democracy that they're having. It's a very lively one. Especially when we're talking something about military, and there are huge issues in Ukrainian military. There's plenty of issues to have, but the good thing is that it's being talked about. The good thing is that the new people, the trusted people, are coming in there. And people are arguing, saying it's like, well, they're just, coming in and they're better. It's not Syrskyi that actually put this guy in. It's Zelensky that put this guy into the charge of the military. Well, then I don't understand. Is the Syrskyi, the commander of the military, is the bad guy that didn't put this guy in? And then Zelensky is the good guy? Who is the bad? Who is the good? And there are issues in Ukrainian society. There's issues with military. There is issues with conscription. But it's being worked on. What I want to underscore is that so far, majority of people, while depressed, because it is painful for them to see the Russians advancing and having all of these bad news. But we see how fast it changes. Remember the Kursk offensive? And it was a boom in the Ukrainian society. You cannot even believe how much love there was suddenly for Syrskyi. Now, it didn't translate because Ukraine still is lacking a lot of resources. But the point is, and I truly believe this, that while there are issues and there is a lot of work that is being done to try to solve these issues, and I'm not fully saying that it's being done without mistakes, There is plenty of mistakes and plenty of things to judge the Zelensky administration for, and he will be judged to the first elections after the war. But what I'm stating is that as soon as Ukraine gets the resources to fight the Russians, as soon as they're able to overcome those Russian major stockpiles that they had and get into some kind of a potential plateau with own development and all production being developed, they could really see a big positive swing towards Zelensky. So let's wrap this video up with a perspective of the good things that are happening this year and next year. The fight is not over. Ukrainians are not giving up. The allies are not giving up. The narratives that Russia is winning bigly is just a big fat lie. Russia has lost incredible amounts this year. They paid an immense price for very little that they gained. In all three areas, you can say that even if there was certain small victories that Russia did, in a big picture, it actually doesn't look that great. And that is the mentality that we need to have. A lot of Ukrainians just returned from the Russian captivity, 189. And these people are coming in to a free country, to the country that is fighting for democracy, for freedom, for future for them, their children, and generations to come of Ukrainians. And they are fighting for us, Europeans, for our freedom from Russian oppression. They are fighting for the Western world and the way of democratic and law-based rule order to fight to restore what the world order has been since the Second World War. I will leave you today with the video of Ukrainian defender coming back to the city where he's from and how he was met. My hope is that we will recognize more of that and that we meet Ukrainian defenders and that we come and help Ukrainian defenders. And the best way to do it right now with this channel is to participate in our fundraiser directly for the Ukrainian armed forces, where we are cutting all of the red tape and getting just some real good trucks to the Ukrainian armed forces that need it so very much. We're way over 25% already now. We're a quarter way there. We're going strong. I believe in you guys. And I want to finish today and this year by saying thanks. Saying thanks to people that are watching this channel, that are continue listening to me. I am not the best person. I am an asshole. A huge asshole. I wanted to say like a medium size or a small asshole, but no, I'm a big asshole. And I can be rude. I can be really pain. You can disagree with me. Yes, but I still love you and I am just who I am. This is who I am. And I'm going to try to do more next year. And I want to say thanks for people that allow me to do more. It's the supporters on the Patreon. It's all of the people that are members and supporters on Buy Me a Coffee. I do read every little messages that you leave here. It's just I never could find the time to respond to every this or make a video for it. But maybe I'll find some time next year. Especially because now I'm going to be dedicating more time. And I, for example, going to be revamping the Patreon page. And I'm going to be revamping some of the Buy Me a Coffee and responding to some of the comments here. And I want to say thanks to all of the YouTube members that are here on the channels, are donating through super chats and memberships. Guys, it's because of you that me and the moderating team are able to continue doing this, and we'll do more of it in 2025. We will do more. We will try to support Ukraine even more until victory, because Ukrainians are fighting for us, and I am grateful to you all that you are allowing me to do this now more and more full time. I love you. Slava Ukraini and Happy New Year.